I still remember the desert air that night. It was dry, yet strangely heavy, carrying the faint scent of dust and static, like the sky itself was humming with electricity. The stars looked closer than ever, sharp and piercing through the fog that hung low to the ground. My car had broken down miles from the nearest town, and the headlights flickered every time I tried the ignition. All I could hear was the faint tick of the cooling engine and the slow rustle of wind dragging sand across the road. I told myself it was nothing, just the silence playing tricks on me. But the desert has a way of swallowing sound, turning every breath into an echo. A pale light moved across the horizon, too smooth to be headlights, too quiet to be a plane. I sat frozen, my hand hovering over the lock button, the hair on my arms rising in the cold night air. That's when the engine started on its own, and in the reflection of my rearview mirror, I saw something standing in the road. It was late, maybe close to midnight. The desert was quiet, too quiet for the windless night. No insects, no shifting air, just a long stretch of pale sand under a half moon. I liked walking there, when everything else was asleep. There's a kind of silence that feels alive out here, like the earth is listening back. That night, I heard it for the first time. A low hum, buried under the stillness. At first, I thought it was my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. But it wasn't. It came from somewhere ahead. Soft, steady, rhythmic. I stopped walking. The hum didn't stop. It pulsed, like breathing through the ground. I knelt down, pressing my hand into the sand. It was cold at first, then faintly warm, like something was humming just beneath my palm. A vibration. I brushed the surface aside, curious. The moonlight fell over something dark, a corner of metal buried deep. A radio, old, rusted, half swallowed by sand. Its antenna was snapped, its dials worn smooth, but it was alive. That same hum poured from it, slow and endless, a note that didn't waver, didn't fade. I brushed more sand away. My fingers tingled. The vibration grew stronger, like the radio was breathing in rhythm with me. It shouldn't have been working. No batteries, no power source, no signal for miles. But still, it hummed. I turned one of the dials. Nothing changed. I turned it again. The pitch rose, just slightly, like it noticed me. The sand shifted beneath my knees. I froze, listening. The hum deepened, no longer one note, but several. Overlapping, trembling. It didn't sound electronic anymore. It sounded alive. My chest tightened. I should have left it there, but I couldn't. Something about the sound pulled me in. A strange comfort, like a voice without words. I dug faster. The sand was warm now, almost hot. My hands ached as the shape beneath grew larger. The more I uncovered, the louder it became. A single tone turning into a chorus of low, grinding breaths. Grains of sand began to jump, vibrating in tiny waves around the hole. I leaned closer. My reflection trembled in the faint metallic surface, but the shape beneath wasn't smooth anymore. It had patterns, ridges, like veins. Something organic pressed against the metal casing. Slow, pulsing, shifting with every hum. My hand hovered over it. I could feel heat rising through the air, like standing over an open mouth in the earth. Then it moved. A slow, inward collapse. The sand dipped. The hum cracked, turning into a deep, trembling moan that rippled through the ground. I stumbled back. The desert floor shook beneath me, not violently, but steadily, as if something massive had rolled over in its sleep. The air was thick. My throat filled with dust and static. I couldn't tell if the radio was still there or if it had melted into the sand completely. I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy, caught in the rhythm of that pulsing below. And then, silence. The vibration stopped. The desert became still again. Even the moon seemed to fade behind a thin sheet of haze. I waited. 5 seconds, 10, no hum, no movement, just the hollow wind returning, slow and careful. I covered the hole with shaking hands, pressing the sand flat until it looked untouched. When I stood, the world felt quieter than before, as if something beneath had finally gone back to sleep. But as I walked away, I could still feel it. That faint warmth under the ground, that echo behind my ribs, like the signal had followed me. And somewhere beneath all that sand, something was still humming. The road had been empty for hours. No headlights behind me. No signs ahead, just the hum of tires against dry asphalt and the desert pressing close on both sides. I saw the motel near midnight. A fading sign flickering in the dark. Half the letters missing, buzzing like trapped flies. Mo El Rest. Stop. The parking lot was cracked, scattered with old stains that looked darker than oil. One lone vending machine blinked by the office window. The clerk didn't say much. He slid a key across the counter, room 6. The key was cold. Metal worn smooth like it had passed through 100 hands. Inside, the room smelled faintly of bleach and something older underneath it. Dust, rust, wet carpet that never dried. I locked the door, closed the curtains tight, and let the stillness settle around me. The clock on the nightstand read 12:47. Red numbers, soft pulsing glow. I lay back, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and the slow creak of wood beneath the floorboards. Sleep came in pieces, shallow, restless. At 3 a.m., the phone rang. It didn't sound real at first, just a sharp bell cutting through the air, like something trying to wake the dead air itself. I stared at it for a few seconds, then reached for the receiver. A click and a whisper, just numbers. Low, drawn out, one by one. Coordinates. I didn't recognize them. Didn't even remember half of them after the line went dead. I held the phone there for a while, listening to nothing. Static, faint, distant. Like the call was still open somewhere far away. The hum of the ceiling fan grew louder, or maybe everything else just went quiet. Something felt wrong, like the air itself was listening now. I walked to the window, pulled the curtain an inch aside. Outside, the parking lot was empty, still. The moon hung low over the edge of the desert, painting everything in a pale, bruised light. Then I saw it. Across the row of rooms, a door slowly opening. Room 2, just a few inches. A pause. Then another, room 3. The hinges groaned. Each door, one after another, creaking open in a slow, patient rhythm. 4. 5. The air felt heavier with each one, like the motel itself was breathing in. I pressed my forehead to the glass. The reflection trembled. The red glow of the clock behind me blinked on my skin. Then it was mine. Room 6. The latch shifted. Metal scraping against metal. A slow, quiet click. I froze. The handle moved just slightly. I stepped back, heart too loud in my chest, trying not to breathe. The door didn't open all the way. It stopped halfway, darkness pressing in from the gap. The smell came first. Dust, dry air. Something faintly sweet, like rot left too long in the sun. No footsteps, no wind, just silence. And that small space between the door and the frame, wide enough for something unseen to look through. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. But the phone rang again, once, then stopped. I turned my head. The cord swung slightly, as if someone had just set it down. When I looked back, the door was closed again, completely. No sound. No trace of movement, only the faint tremor of air as if something had passed through the room and gone quiet just behind the walls. The clock read 3:09. Its glow flickered, then died. I sat on the bed until dawn. Didn't move. Didn't sleep. When the first light touched the curtains, I opened the door. The hallway was empty. Every door stood wide open, including mine. Only the wind moved now, stirring thin trails of dust across the floor. I looked toward the desert, and for a moment, I thought I saw shapes, distant still, waiting at the edge of the sand. The coordinates whispered through my mind again, soft as breath. I never wrote them down. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear them, and I think, if I followed them, I might find where the others went. The desert nights always felt heavier in winter. Cold air pressed against the windows. The lights above the gas pumps flickered, yellow, tired, buzzing like trapped flies that couldn't die. It was almost 2 a.m. I was the only one there. The hum of the refrigerator filled the small shop. Rows of snacks dusted with sand from the highway wind. The clock above the register ticked softly, but somehow slower than usual. I liked that time of night. Quiet, empty, the kind of silence that almost swallows your breath. Until I saw him, a shape at the far edge of the parking lot. Tall, still. At first, I thought it was a signpost or a shadow thrown by the flickering light, but it wasn't. There was space around it, like the darkness bent just slightly to make room for it. I squinted through the glass. No movement. Just that tall outline, standing where the asphalt met the sand. I looked down to unlock the door, then looked back. It was closer, only a few feet. But closer. My chest tightened. I turned the lights off behind the counter, watching the figure through the glass as my reflection faded into the dark. It didn't move. Not even a shift. Not even a breath. I grabbed the phone. No signal. The line had been cutting out for weeks, but tonight it felt deliberate. I turned toward the monitor screens. 6 cameras, each showing different corners of the lot. Empty. No figure. No shadow. Just the pumps and the pale wash of fluorescent light. I looked back through the window again. He was there. A little closer now, almost at the edge of the light. My hands were sweating. I blinked hard, trying to clear the blur from my eyes. When I opened them, he was gone. The parking lot looked empty again. Even the air seemed stiller, but I could feel him. Somewhere between the pumps and the edge of my sight, the hum of the lights grew louder. A faint static crawled in my ears, like a radio just out of tune. I checked the cameras again. All blank. Just the same empty image. Looping, then a flicker. For half a second, one of the screens turned black. When it came back, there was something faint in the corner. A streak, tall and narrow, as if someone had brushed past the lens. I turned to the window again. My breath caught. He was standing directly under the nearest light now, close enough to see the shape of his shoulders. But the light didn't touch him. It just stopped, as if he stood behind it, inside some darker space that shouldn't have been there. My mouth went dry. I whispered to myself, trying to make my voice sound steady. You're tired. You're seeing things. But the clock behind me ticked once, and the light above the pump went out. One by one, they started to die. The hum stopped. The room sank into silence. In that stillness, I heard something soft. A shuffle of gravel. Slow, uneven steps, moving toward the window. I backed away, eyes locked on the glass. The cameras flickered again. For one frame, he was standing just outside the door. Then gone. I turned toward the exit. Nothing there. Only the faint smell of cold air and dust pushing through the cracks. The lights returned, one by one. The parking lot was empty again. I stood there until the sun began to bleed through the horizon. When the morning shift arrived, I was still by the counter. They found the front door unlocked, and the cameras frozen on that same still frame, the door wide open, and a shape half seen in the glow of the pump light. No one ever found the tape from that night. They said the clerk left before sunrise, but the morning staff still swear, sometimes when the lights flicker just right, you can see someone standing at the far edge of the parking lot, perfectly still, waiting. The salt flats stretch farther than the eye can hold. White, endless, blinding under the winter sun. The air feels thin here, dry enough to sting the lungs. I came to photograph the silence. The way it folds over itself until it starts to hum inside your head. By sunset, I was miles from the road. My tent sat alone, a small gray dot against the pale ground. No trees, no shadows. Just the horizon, flat and waiting. When the light began to fade, the ground turned silver. Each step crackled softly beneath my boots. I walked in a wide circle around the campsite, checking my gear, marking my path with the tripod legs. My own footprints trailed behind me. two neat lines pressed into the salt. Then the wind rose, slow and dry, dragging a hiss across the surface. When I turned back, I saw them. Two sets of footprints. Not one, my own and another beside them. Same size, same pattern, but they curved differently. Circling me, my throat went tight. I followed the prints with my flashlight. They looped around the tent, then back toward the flats, fading into nothing. There was no one out here. No tire tracks. No movement. Just the silence again, deep enough to hear my heartbeat. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Maybe old impressions from earlier in the day, reshaped by the wind. I crawled into the tent, zipped it shut, and tried to focus on breathing. The fabric rustled faintly as it cooled. The camera beside me blinked red, charging, recording, alive in its own small way. I must have drifted off for an hour, maybe less. Then I woke. The air was colder. The world outside the tent had gone still. No wind, no sound. Just breathing. Slow, heavy. Right outside the thin wall of fabric. It wasn't mine. I froze, holding my breath until my chest burned. A shadow shifted on the tent wall, a pale blur moving across the canvas. Then, stillness. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed felt wrong, too full, too aware. I reached for the camera, fingers shaking, and switched to night mode. The lens caught faint static, grains of light, and something just at the edge of the frame. A shape, low to the ground, circling the tent. I didn't move. Couldn't. The salt outside began to creak under soft footsteps. Slow, deliberate, like something pacing, testing the air between each step. The tent fabric trembled. A handprint pressed against it, thin, colorless, as if the salt itself had touched through. I wanted to scream, but the sound stayed trapped in my throat. The shadow lingered there for a moment. Then it lowered. Closer. Breathing again. This time softer, closer to my ear. I could feel the cold pushing through the fabric. A faint whisper of air, then it was gone. The footsteps moved away, growing lighter, until there was nothing, only the hum of blood rushing in my ears. I waited until dawn, until the light turned the tent walls white again. When I finally stepped outside, the world looked untouched, except for the footprints. Two sets, perfectly preserved, circling the tent again and again, like something had walked through the night and never left. I packed my gear in silence, feeling the air heavy with a taste like metal. When I looked up, the horizon was empty. But for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing far out in the flats, still facing me. The camera's battery was dead. My memory card was blank. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear that slow breathing and the soft crunch of salt just beyond the edge of light. It was supposed to be a short drive, a weekend trip through the desert, just me, my wife, and our little girl asleep in the back seat. The sky was pale that evening, a thin layer of orange fading into gray. Wind pressed against the car, and the world smelled of dust and gasoline. Miles of empty highway stretched ahead. No towns, no lights. Just the hum of tires and the low crackle of the radio. Then the engine stuttered. Once, twice, and died. The silence that followed felt too big. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I tried the key again. Nothing. The radio stayed on, though. A thin hiss of static, soft and endless. I stepped out. The air was colder than it should have been. The horizon flickered in the distance, a shimmer of heat that didn't belong to the sun. My wife stayed inside, watching me through the windshield. Our daughter slept on, her small hand pressed against the window glass. I opened the hood. Everything looked fine, but the static behind me grew louder, like the car was breathing. Then it stopped. For a moment, the silence was perfect. Then a voice spoke, low, whispered, soft enough to almost miss. It said my name. I froze. The radio clicked once, then filled with static again, thin and broken, as if something was moving through the frequency. Another voice followed. This time, I knew it. It was my brother. But he'd been gone for 3 years. The words came slow, drawn out between the bursts of noise. "Get back in the car." The voice sounded wrong. Familiar, but heavy, like it had been dragged from somewhere far away. I slammed the hood and stepped back. My wife leaned out the window asking what was wrong. Before I could answer, the static rose again. Now it was layered. A dozen voices tangled together, whispering names, over and over. Mine, hers, our daughter's. Each voice belonged to someone I recognized. Old friends. Family. All of them dead. The sound filled the car, vibrating the glass, pushing through the air like a pulse. My wife covered her ears. I reached in to turn it off, but the dial wouldn't move. The voices grew clearer, almost in unison now. A slow chant, breaking through the static like waves. I could make out full sentences, small fragments, warnings. "Please." Then one voice rose above the rest. It was my mother's. She'd been gone for nearly a decade. But her voice, it was perfect. Calm, gentle, just like I remembered. She said, "You shouldn't stop here." I stared at the radio, heart hammering in my chest. My wife whispered that we should go. Just start walking, find help before dark. I looked out toward the horizon. The sky had turned colorless, flat and cold, and there, in the distance, a line of shapes stood along the road. Still, watching, too far to see faces. But their outlines were clear against the fading light. I blinked. They were closer. I grabbed my wife's hand, told her to wake the child. But when I looked back at the radio, the static stopped. Then came one last whisper, soft, breaking, right beside my ear. It said our daughter's name, not through the speaker, but inside the car. Right behind her seat, she stirred in her sleep, smiled faintly, and whispered something back. I couldn't make out the words. When I turned, the seat beside her was empty, but the door was open. The wind rushed in. The highway stretched silent in every direction. The shapes were gone. Only the radio remained, still faintly humming, the static slowing, softening, like it was breathing its last. I picked it up, pressed my ear close, and through the noise my mother's voice whispered one final time, "Don't follow her." Then, nothing, just the hum of the wind and the soft flicker of the dashboard light. By morning, the sun rose over the highway, empty and pale. The car sat open, doors wide, radio still on, playing only static. The desert at night has its own kind of silence. Not empty or just wide. Like the air itself is holding its breath. I'd been driving for hours. A long haul through Nevada, miles of nothing but road and the pale light of my headlights. The dashboard clock said 2:14 a.m. The air smelled faintly of dust and diesel, a soft hum under the tires, a low whistle through the cracked window. It was the kind of drive where time drips slow, where the sky feels too close and the stars too many. Out here, the dark doesn't just surround you, it swallows you whole. Then something shifted. At first I thought it was my eyes, that blur you get when you've stared too long at the road. But it wasn't that. The sky moved. The stars bent, like ripples spreading through deep water. The whole sky seemed to fold. Once, then again. It was slow, graceful, quiet, the kind of movement that shouldn't exist. I pulled the truck to the shoulder, engine idling low. When I stepped out, the cold hit me hard, thin, dry, sharp enough to sting. The sky stretched wide overhead, but it wasn't the same. The stars. They weren't where they should be. Constellations broken apart, rearranged like someone had brushed their hand across the universe. I felt small. Smaller than ever. The wind had stopped. Even the hum of the truck faded, like the world itself was listening. Then, from the horizon, a faint light rolled upward. Not sunrise, but a shimmer, soft and white. folding the edges of the sky in on itself. The air vibrated, not loud, more like the ground beneath my boots was humming. The light spread, and for a moment, everything looked doubled. The stars, the road, even my own hands. It was like standing inside a reflection that didn't belong to me. Then it was gone. The silence that followed was too deep. The kind that presses against your chest. I climbed back into the truck. The clock still read 2:14. It hadn't moved. The headlights flicked on, but the road ahead looked wrong. The lines were faint, the asphalt smooth and unmarked. No signs, no lights. Just a single black strip stretching into nowhere. I pressed the gas. The wheels rolled slow, grinding against the silence. Every few miles I glanced up, hoping the sky would fix itself. But it stayed folded. Bent in on itself, like a curtain caught mid-drift. The air outside shimmered faintly, as if heat were rising from the cold. I reached for the CB, tried to call in. Static answered. Low, broken static, the kind that almost sounds like breathing. I turned the dial, listening for anything human. Nothing. Only whispers that came and went, just below the noise. Sometimes, I thought I heard my own name. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides. But it didn't look like the same desert anymore. The sand glowed faintly under the stars, not white, not gold, but something between. A color that didn't belong on Earth. I slowed to a stop again. Left the engine running. When I stepped out, the air was warm now. And the hum I'd felt before, and it was stronger. Every breath carried it. The horizon flickered once more, like a thin sheet of light folding in slow motion. I watched as the stars rearranged again, like a hand smoothing out fabric. I knew somehow that if I blinked, I'd miss the moment everything changed again, so I didn't. I stood there staring, as the night reshaped itself into something unrecognizable. The world felt smaller, rounder, like I was standing on the inside of it now, and not on the surface. When I finally turned back toward the truck, the logo on the side was wrong. Different color, different letters. The plates didn't look like mine either. Inside, the dashboard clock was working again. But it read 4:32, 2 hours gone, just missing. I got back on the road, hands shaking on the wheel. The sky above me hung heavy, folded in strange layers. Like the whole world was still rearranging itself. And somewhere behind me, I swear I could hear that low hum again, moving with me, following. By dawn, I saw the first sign on the side of the road. The letters were in a language I didn't recognize, but I kept driving. Because whatever this place was, I knew it wasn't home, and I didn't dare look back. The desert stretches quiet this far out. Endless rock, dry air that hums against your skin. No trees, no shade, just the slow weight of sunlight pressing down. I'd been walking since morning. My car had given up miles behind me. No signal, no clouds, only that soft shimmer on the horizon, like heat pretending to be water. By afternoon, I saw it, a cabin, small, wood darkened with age. Just sitting there in the sand where nothing else should have been. I thought maybe it was an old mining post, a rest stop maybe. But as I got closer, it felt wrong. No windows. No chimney, just one crooked door, closed tight. The air near it felt heavier, still, like the world was holding its breath. I circled once. There was no sign of life, no footprints, no sound, only the low hum of the desert wind fading into silence. When I reached out and touched the wall, it vibrated. Soft at first, then stronger, like something deep inside was moving. Slowly, I pulled my hand back. The vibration stopped. The wood was cold. Too cold for this heat. For a long time, I just stood there watching that single door. It wasn't locked. It wasn't even fully shut, just resting like it wanted to be opened. Inside my head, something said, "Don't." But curiosity is quiet and patient. It whispers until you listen. I pushed the door open. The air that came out was still and stale, like a cellar left sealed for years. It smelled faintly of metal and dust that had never known sunlight. I stepped inside. The space was small. One room, bare wooden floor. No windows, no light except what the doorway allowed in. My boots echoed softly. Every sound came back slower than it should, like the air was thick, and the hum was there again, low, constant, deep inside the walls. It wasn't coming from the ground. It wasn't coming from above. It felt like it lived inside the wood itself. I pressed my palm flat against the wall. The vibration moved under my skin like a heartbeat, but it didn't match mine. I whispered, "Hello?" The hum changed, only for a moment, a small stutter. Then steady again. I thought maybe it was the wind, or some old generator buried somewhere below, but there was no power line, no wiring, no marks of tools or construction, just smooth walls, too smooth, like they'd grown that way. The light from the door dimmed suddenly. I turned. The sun outside had dipped behind a thin layer of clouds. Pale light filled the doorway, flat and cold. That's when I felt it, the weight of something watching. It wasn't a sound or a movement. Just pressure behind me. All around me, my skin prickled. The hum deepened. I could feel it in my teeth now, in my chest. I stepped back toward the door, but the space didn't feel the same. Each step took longer than it should have. The walls seemed to stretch like the room was breathing, in, out, slow and steady. I reached for the door frame. The wood was slick with condensation, wet, even though the air was dry. I pushed the door open wider. Light spilled in again, too bright, white enough to sting my eyes. Outside, the desert was silent. Even the wind had stopped. I turned once more just to see it again, that strange, empty room. And in the faint reflection of the light, I thought I saw the walls move. Not shifting, but pulsing. Like breath through lungs, the hum followed me out. Fainter now, but still there. When I stepped back into the sand, the air felt thinner, cooler. I walked for a long time before looking back. The cabin was smaller in the distance, almost lost in the haze. Still no windows. Still no sign of life, but I could swear it wasn't in the same place anymore. Tilted slightly, as if it had turned to watch me go. By the time I reached the ridge, the sun was setting. The horizon glowed pale red, and the hum in my chest finally faded. But even now, when I close my eyes at night, I feel that vibration again. Low, slow, waiting. And sometimes, if the room is quiet enough, I can still hear it. The faint hum of the walls breathing. It was supposed to be a quiet hike. Late autumn, cold air thinning above the pines. The kind of silence that feels clean, almost holy. I started just before dusk. The trail wound upward, past dried grass and stone that still held a trace of heat from the day. Everything smelled like dirt and pine sap. Everything felt still. Locals had warned me not to stay past dark. They said strange things appeared on the ridge after sundown. A tower that hummed faintly against the wind. A signal that no one could trace. And when dawn came, it was gone. I laughed when they told me. But still, I packed light and made sure my watch was working. By the time the sun fell, I was halfway up. The forest around me had turned black and silver, the sky a wash of deep blue. Just before night takes everything, then I saw it. A faint red light through the trees, steady, pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat in the fog. At first I thought it was a plane beacon, or maybe a ranger's tower, but when I checked my map, there was nothing there. I walked closer. The light stayed the same distance away. It didn't flicker, didn't blink, just glowed softly, casting a dull red tint on the mist that had started to rise. The trees grew thinner, the air colder. The hum began then, so low it could have been the wind or maybe the blood in my ears. My watch ticked once, then again, then backward. I stared at it for a long time. The hands moved in reverse, slow, deliberate. I tapped the glass, but it kept rewinding. Seconds melting away, a pulse of static brushed the air just beyond hearing. I turned, nothing behind me. No trail, just fog. The red glow was closer now. And then I saw it. The tower. It shouldn't have been there. Steel rising high above the trees, too thin, too tall, stretching far past where the clouds began. It didn't fade into the night sky, it bent it. The stars around it seemed to warp, like they were being pulled inward. Every few seconds, that dull red blink, soft, patient, like it was breathing. I took another step. The hum deepened. The ground vibrated faintly under my boots. It wasn't made of metal, not really. Up close, the surface rippled slightly, like liquid under tension. Shapes moved just beneath it, and shadows or reflections that didn't match my own. I reached out. The air around it was warm. Too warm for the night. My fingertips buzzed. The hairs on my arms lifted. Then, everything went silent. No wind. No crickets. No breath, only that heartbeat pulse of red. My watch stopped completely. The second hand frozen at 12. And when I looked down at my feet, the dirt beneath me was smooth, like glass. I took one step back. And the hum changed. Lower. Deeper. Like the tower knew I was leaving. Something in the fog moved. Not fast, just a shape. Tall, thin, mirroring the same stretch as the tower. It flickered once, then vanished. I turned and ran. Branches clawed at my jacket, the fog thickening around my legs. The red light followed, flashing through the mist, never brighter, never dimmer. I didn't stop until I saw the lights of the town again. By then, the sky had begun to pale. The tower was gone. Just stars. Just quiet. When I reached my car, my watch ticked forward again. But the date was wrong. It said Thursday. 3 days later. I've gone back since. Daytime. Maps. Nothing there. No metal. No foundation. No hum in the ground. But sometimes, when I drive that stretch of road at night, I see the faint red glow on the ridge. Not bright. Just enough to let me know it's still there. Waiting for the dark. The road stretched empty for miles. Flat land, no lights, no motion. Just the hum of the tires and the slow pull of desert wind across the asphalt. It was early evening, but the sky already looked bruised. Dust rolled along the horizon, a dull orange curtain pushing toward me. I thought it would pass. Most storms here do, but this one didn't. The first gust hit like breath against the car. Then another. Grains of dust scraped the glass, soft at first, then harsher, like thousands of fingernails tracing the windows. The world dimmed to a strange red-brown. The headlights cut through nothing. No lines on the road, no edges. Just a wall of dust thick enough to taste. I slowed down, hands tight on the wheel. The air felt heavy, pressing against the car from every direction. Inside it was quiet. Too quiet. Then something moved ahead. Shapes. Faint. Walking across the highway. Slowly. At first I thought they were people. Stranded travelers, maybe, trying to wave me down. But they didn't move right. Too smooth. Too silent. The dust swirled around them, but their forms stayed still, like shadows carved out of fog. One turned its head toward me, I think. I couldn't see a face, just a pale outline, tall, thin, wrong. I stopped the car. Every instinct told me not to, but I did anyway. The figures drifted closer. The wind pushed harder, screaming across the windows. The shapes flickered, appearing, disappearing, as if the storm was breathing them in and out. Then one brushed past the front of the car. The engine stuttered. The dashboard lights dimmed, and something pressed against the glass. A hand, pale, dust-coated, the print clear and perfect. Fingers long, almost delicate. I couldn't move. Just watched as more handprints began to form, one after another, covering every window, each print pressed slow and deliberate, like someone tracing from the inside. The car filled with a faint vibration, a low hum. Not from the engine, from the air itself. The storm outside spun faster, dust curling in tight spirals around the car. I couldn't see the road anymore. Only swirling orange and brown, lit faintly by my own headlights. Then for a moment, everything stopped. The storm froze. The car didn't shake. Even the dust hung still in the air. I realized I couldn't hear anything. Not the wind, Not my breath, only that hum. Inside the cabin, under my skin. It grew louder, like a voice trapped behind glass. I turned toward the back seat. Someone was sitting there, a faint outline, head tilted, hands resting on their knees. No features, just the sense of presence. I blinked. Gone. The hum stopped. The storm moved again, and as if time had just resumed, I hit the gas. The car lurched forward. The storm followed for a few seconds, then began to thin. Light broke through, faint gray enough to see the horizon again. When I finally cleared the storm, I pulled over. My hands were shaking. The air outside was cool now, smelling faintly of rain. I stepped out. The car was covered in prints. Dozens of them. Each one pressed from the inside of the glass, as if someone had been trying to get out. The dashboard clock was wrong. It said 3:12 a.m., but I'd entered the storm just after sunset. I checked my phone. Dead. Every photo I'd taken on the trip, gone. When I got back into the car, the windows were fogged over again. Something had written a single word in the mist, drawn by a fingertip. Stay. The word faded as I watched, slowly disappearing into the glass. The road ahead was empty again, the sky clear, but the air still tasted like dust. And faintly, under the hum of the engine, I swear I could hear breathing, steady, quiet, right behind me. I hadn't been back here in almost 30 years. Same stretch of desert, same broken highway. Only difference was me. When I was a kid, I saw something land out here. A soft green light that bent the horizon, like heat through glass. Everyone said it was a dream. A story I told too many times, but the desert doesn't dream. It remembers. I parked my truck near the dry riverbed, where the sand turns gray and fine, and the air hums just slightly, like static under the skin. Even now, the ground still glows faintly. Not bright, but enough to see your own shadow in the dark. It pulses, slow and patient, as if the earth is breathing. The sky was clear that night. Cold. The kind of cold that makes every sound sharper, every heartbeat louder. I set up my tent, made a small fire, and watched the horizon fade into black. The desert stretched in every direction. No towns, no movement, only the steady hum of nothing. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I opened my eyes, the fire was gone. Just ash. And the tent? It was far behind me. I was lying in the sand, half buried, facing the glowing patch of ground. I hadn't heard anything, hadn't moved. But somehow I was at least 50 feet away. My footprints started near the tent and ended right where I woke up, a clean trail across untouched sand. I told myself it was sleepwalking. The cold, the silence. Maybe I'd just drifted off and moved without knowing. But the next night, it happened again. I woke even farther away. This time on top of a dune with the moon low behind me, the sand was warm beneath me. And for a moment I thought I heard breathing, slow, shallow, close to my ear. When I turned, nothing was there. Only wind. The tent glowed faintly in the distance, the same shade as the ground beneath it. It didn't look like fabric anymore. It looked alive. Like something thin, stretched too tight, waiting for me to come back. That's when I noticed something else. The light wasn't just on the ground anymore. It was under it. Lines of pale green ran through the sand, branching like veins, glowing faintly between the grains. When I stepped closer, the hum grew louder, matching the rhythm of my pulse. I knelt down, pressed my hand to the ground. Warm, almost wet. The hum changed pitch, higher, sharper, as if the desert recognized me. Then everything went still. No wind, no stars, just silence. And in that silence, a memory surfaced. That night when I was a child. The light falling from the sky, the shimmer that swallowed the sound around me. I'd seen something step out of it. Not a craft. Not a person, just shape. Tall. Unclear. Like the air itself was bending around it. I'd forgotten that part. Or maybe I'd been made to. I backed away from the glowing sand, heart shaking against my ribs. But no matter which direction I turned, the light followed underfoot. Like it was moving with me, marking every step. When I finally crawled back into the tent, it was vibrating softly, like it had been breathing in my absence. Inside, everything looked untouched. Sleeping bag, flashlight, journal. But the sand beneath me glowed faintly through the floor. I didn't sleep, just waited for dawn. When light finally came, the glow was gone. The hum faded with it. Only stillness remained. I packed quickly, drove until the desert turned back into highway. But when I checked the rearview mirror, I could still see it. A faint shimmer in the distance, rippling like heat, right where I'd been. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I wake up in strange places. On the floor, by the window. Once outside on the porch, always facing east, toward the desert. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear that low hum, rising through the earth, soft and patient, like something beneath the sand is still calling my name. We worked nights because the heat was too much during the day. The desert holds on to warmth like a secret, refusing to let it go. By sundown, the wind turns cold and dry, and the sand crunches beneath your boots like old glass. That night, the air was still, no moon. Only the soft glow of our work lamps pushing against the dark. We were digging near the ridge, an old silver site abandoned for years. They said the earth here still had stories left in it. I believed that, but not like this. I remember pausing to drink, the taste of dust thick in my throat. When something caught my eye, a shimmer under the sand, like heat waves where there shouldn't be any at first. I thought it was the reflection from my lamp, but it moved, slowly. A faint line of light gliding beneath the surface like something large was crawling just under us. I crouched down. The ground trembled. Soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing, I called out to the others. Their lights swung toward me, faces pale beneath their helmets. None of us spoke for a while. We just watched as the sand around us began to glow, faint circles spreading outward, pulsing in sync. Someone whispered my name, but I couldn't tell who. Their voices were shaking. Every lamp flickered at once. Then, movement, not just one shape anymore. Dozens. Long and fluid, twisting beneath the sand like shadows underwater. Each line of light slid closer. Too smooth to be human, too heavy to be wind. We stepped back. The sand followed. Wherever we moved, it moved too. One of the men dropped his shovel. The sound echoed too long, like the air itself didn't want it to stop. That's when the first light broke the surface. A beam, thin as a finger, rising up through the grains like smoke. It hung there for a second, then bent toward us, curving as if it could see. The others ran. I should have too, but I couldn't move. The lights weren't random anymore. They were forming shapes, limbs, spines, faces that didn't stay still long enough to understand. Each one pressing upward, close to breaking through. The ground rippled beneath me. My boots sank an inch into the sand. The hum began, deep, low, vibrating through my chest. It wasn't coming from the air. It was coming from below. I turned and ran. The sand chased in waves, flashing faint green with every step I took. Behind me, I could see them. Those glowing forms rolling beneath the surface, keeping pace. The faster I ran, the closer they got. Until the hum turned sharp, like static tearing through the night. I tripped near the ridge. Hit the ground hard! When I lifted my head, the lights had stopped. They hovered just a few feet away, frozen under the sand. Waiting. The air buzzed. Tiny sparks rose from the ground, drifting upward like ash. I could feel heat spreading through my palms where they touched the earth. A slow burn, like something underneath was pressing back against me. Then it all went dark. I woke up at dawn. The ridge was empty. My lamp was cold. The sand looked untouched. No tracks, no glow, no sign anyone had been there. The others never came back. The company sent search teams. They found the trucks, our tools, even the camp stove still warm. But the ground near the dig site was strange, smooth, as if the wind had polished it overnight. And when they dug into it, they said the sand glowed for just a second. Then went dark again. That was 3 months ago. I still dream of it sometimes. The lights moving under my feet, circling, waiting. And when I wake, My bed sheets are warm with static, and there's a thin line of dust spilling in from under the door. It hums softly when I touch it, like the desert hasn't forgotten me. Not yet. It was supposed to be a shortcut. The highway stretched quiet and silver beneath a pale evening sky. Desert on both sides. No towns for miles. The kids had fallen asleep in the back. Their small breaths fogged the windows. My wife traced circles on the dashboard, half dreaming with her eyes open. That's when I saw it, a narrow exit, half hidden behind a faded sign. No number, just a single word that I couldn't quite read. It wasn't on the map, but the gas gauge was low, and the thought of finding something, anything, was enough to make me turn the wheel. The ramp curved gently down, disappearing into a stretch of road lined with crooked streetlights. Each one flickered like it was struggling to stay awake. At the bottom of the hill, a gas station appeared. The kind that feels left over from another decade. Its lights buzzed faintly. A red neon sign blinked open, though the O had long since died. I parked beside the single pump. The air smelled like burnt metal and old rain. Inside, the attendant looked up before I even stepped through the door. His smile was wide, too wide, as if he'd been waiting for someone. "Long drive," he said softly. His voice didn't quite match his face. Too calm, too practiced. I nodded, asked if there was a way back to the main highway. He pointed toward the road. "Just follow it," he said. "It always loops back." Something in the way he said always made my skin tighten. Still, I filled the tank, paid, and drove on. The road was smooth. The same cracked asphalt winding through low hills and dry brush. We drove for 20 minutes, then 30. Then the same gas station appeared again, same crooked lights, same flickering sign, same attendant standing outside, smiling. My wife looked at me, confused. I laughed it off, said I must have missed a turn, but the map on my phone wouldn't load. Just a gray screen, no signal. We tried again. Back onto the road. Same direction. Same silence pressing through the windows, and again. The gas station. This time, the attendant didn't go inside. He stood by the door, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something we couldn't hear. I could feel the children stir in the back seat. My daughter whispered, "Didn't we already stop here?" I didn't answer. The steering wheel felt warm, too warm, like something was humming beneath it. I pressed harder on the gas. The world around us began to blur. Same hills, same trees, the same pale shape of a billboard that said nothing at all. And then the station again, the same pump, the same soft hum. But this time, the neon sign wasn't blinking anymore. It was glowing steady, bright red. The attendant was closer now, leaning against the pump, grinning. His teeth looked strange, like they had too many edges. I rolled up the window, told myself it was just exhaustion, that we'd find the right road once morning came. But night didn't move. The clock on the dashboard froze at 11:47. Every time I checked, it was the same. I tried turning around, back toward the ramp, toward anything different. But the moment I did, the road ahead bent in on itself, as if folding. And there, like a reflection in still water, the gas station stood again. This time, the lights were off. No hum, no wind. Only the attendant, standing in the doorway, smiling wider than before. He raised his hand slowly and pointed at the sky. For a moment, I looked up. No stars. Just a blank stretch of gray, folded over itself, like the world had forgotten what direction was. When I looked back down, he was gone. Only the faint glow of the pumps remained, flickering, like eyes half closed in sleep. I kept driving. The tank never ran out. The road never changed. And sometimes, when I slow down, I swear I can still see that man standing just beyond the headlights, waiting, his smile stretching through the dark. The desert at night feels endless. Cold air pressing against your skin. Every sound travels too far, and the silence that follows feels alive. I was the only ranger on duty that night. Mid-July, moonless sky. The air smelled like dry salt and iron. That strange desert scent right before dawn. My post sat at the edge of a wildlife reserve. A small trailer with a flickering porch light and a radio that never stayed quiet for long. Coyotes were common. Their cries echoed across the dunes like laughter trying to sound human. But that night the calls felt different. Longer, lower, almost deliberate. I was checking the perimeter lights when I first heard it. A voice calling from the ridge, my name, whispered, soft, drawn out like it was testing the sound of it. Kai. It froze me. Every hair on my arms rose. At first I thought it was the wind carrying something from the highway, but the nearest road was 20 miles east. Then it came again. Closer this time. Same voice. Same slow, deliberate tone. Kai. I turned off my flashlight and let my eyes adjust. The desert stretched pale under starlight. Waves of sand frozen mid-motion. Nothing moved. No tracks. No figures, but something was watching. I could feel it. That quiet pressure you get when the world holds its breath, I whispered into the radio. Just static. The signal cut out halfway through my name. The air tasted like dust. Dry, bitter, as if something had burned nearby. I took one cautious step forward, then another. The wind shifted and I saw movement, a shape on the ridge, small, thin. 4 legs at first. It stood there, outlined against the horizon. Ears pointed toward me, eyes catching the faintest trace of light. A coyote. Alone. I almost laughed from relief. But before I could lower my light, it moved again, and this time it stood up. 2 legs, perfectly balanced. The body too long. Arms hanging just a little too low, the head tilted, the jaw shifting side to side like it was trying to remember how a mouth worked. Kai. The sound wasn't a growl, wasn't a voice either. It was like hearing your name whispered through a cracked radio, half breath, half static. I stepped back. The sand under my boots felt wrong, soft and uneven, as if something was moving beneath it. The figure began walking toward me, slowly, almost curious. Its eyes reflected no light now, only depth. I raised my flashlight again. The beam caught its fur, gray, matted, streaked with something darker, and then it stopped. Head tilted again, mouth open just enough for another sound to crawl out. Come back. I hadn't moved, but it said, come back, like it thought I had been there before. The words trembled through the air, thin as cobweb. I turned, started walking fast, then running. Every few steps I heard the soft rustle of sand behind me. Not close, but steady. When I reached the trailer, I slammed the door, locked it, killed the lights. Silence pressed against the glass. And then one faint tap, then another. At the window, I couldn't bring myself to look. The tapping stopped. And from somewhere just beyond the wall, a whisper. Kai. I didn't sleep that night. When morning came, I found tracks outside. They circled the trailer twice, then stopped, halfway between human and animal. The prints led nowhere, just vanished into the sand. They told me it was the heat, the desert playing tricks, that I must have been dreaming. But some nights, when the air goes still and the coyotes start calling again, I can hear one voice just a little too clear. Always the same tone, always the same distance away, and always saying my name. The desert was quiet that night. Not peaceful, just quiet in the way that feels watched. I'd driven out past the old highway, following the cracked road to where the observatory still stood. No one had used it in decades. Its dome was rusted through, paint peeled away by heat and time. But the glass inside, the mirrors, were said to still catch the stars. I wanted to see them. Just once. The air smelled like dry metal. Dust clung to my tongue. Every step echoed against the empty structure like I wasn't alone. When I pushed open the door, the hinges gave a low cry, a sound that disappeared too quickly. Inside, everything was still. My flashlight caught motes drifting in the air, slow as snow. The dome above me had cracked open. Through the split, the night sky spilled in. 1,000 stars, white and sharp. But it was the mirrors that caught my breath. Dozens of them. Big circular panels leaned against the walls and floor. Each one clean, as if the dust refused to touch them. They reflected the sky perfectly. Or at least, I thought they did. When I stepped closer, something felt off. The stars in the glass moved differently, just slightly slower. Their constellations twisted in ways I couldn't place. I blinked, looked up, then back at the reflection. In the real sky, Orion stood sharp above the horizon. In the mirrors, he was facing the wrong direction. I stared for a long time. My heartbeat matched the faint hum in the air, a vibration that came from nowhere and everywhere. I walked to another mirror, then another. Each one showed the same stars, but not the same sky. It was like every mirror had its own version of the night, each slightly different. Shifted, bent, unfamiliar. My breath fogged the glass. For a moment, my reflection hung between two worlds. Then something behind it moved. I froze. It was subtle. A figure, faint and colorless, stepping between the reflections of the stars. Not behind me. Behind it, the reflection tilted its head. Not me, the other one. A heartbeat later, my reflection copied the motion. I whispered into the dark. No reply. The air felt colder now, like the dome itself was breathing in. When I took a step back, my reflection didn't. It just stood there, still, patient. The stars behind it began to drift faster, circling like a whirlpool. The hum deepened, vibrating through my chest and into the floor. I reached out, slowly, my hand shaking. The surface rippled, like water under glass. Then the reflection leaned forward. Not stepped, leaned as if pressing through. For one breathless moment, I saw its face clearly. It was mine, but not lit by my flashlight. Its eyes reflected nothing. Just two empty voids where light should have been. I stumbled back, hit a pile of metal scraps. The noise echoed sharp and violent. When I looked up again, the mirror was still. Just me again, only me. The air had gone completely silent. No hum, no movement, just the faint smell of dust and glass cooling. I backed out of the dome, one step at a time. Outside, the stars looked normal again. Still. But when I turned toward my car, something caught my eye. In the windows, just faintly, the stars' reflections moved the wrong way, and one figure stood perfectly still between them, watching. It was raining when I left the city. Thin, silver rain that barely touched the ground before vanishing into steam, the kind that blurs headlights into long streaks of white. I'd been driving for hours. The road stretched ahead, black and endless, a single ribbon between two fields of fog. The wipers moved slow, their rhythm soft and steady. Left, right, left, right. I wasn't tired. Just empty. The highway was quiet. No cars, no towns. Just the steady hum of my tires on wet pavement. I remember glancing at the rearview mirror. Not for any reason. Just habit, and that's when I saw it. Someone sitting in the passenger seat only for a second. A faint shape, dark hair, still face. Then gone. My hands tightened on the wheel. The rain kept falling. The seat beside me was empty again. I told myself it was reflection. A trick of the light. Maybe the shape of my jacket caught in the glass. But when I looked again, they were there, closer this time. Turned slightly toward me. My breath caught. I didn't turn my head. Couldn't. The mirror trembled in the dim light, and I saw, just for a heartbeat, their lips move. I think they said my name. The car drifted toward the shoulder, and I jerked the wheel back. The tires hissed on wet asphalt. The figure was gone. I drove in silence for miles after that. Every few minutes, I checked the mirror again. Empty. Then not. Empty again. Each time they returned, they were clearer. At first, just a shadow. Then the curve of a face. Then eyes, open too wide, staring straight ahead. The air in the car felt heavier, colder. My own breath fogged the window. I wanted to speak, to ask what it wanted, but the words wouldn't come out. The rain eased, but the road stayed slick and shining, like black glass. Somewhere in the distance, lightning flickered behind the clouds, and for a second, in the mirror, the figure smiled. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind. It was familiar. I felt something shift inside my chest. A memory. A name I hadn't spoken in years. Her name. I whispered it. Barely. The way you say something to yourself, to make sure it's still real. The figure tilted its head. The smile faded. The wipers slowed. The car hummed softly. Everything felt slower now. Like the road itself was stretching thin. I forced myself to look. To turn my head, the seat beside me was empty. But the smell, the faint scent of her perfume, still hung in the air. Rainwater and lavender. My throat tightened. I hadn't smelled that in years, the night she left. I'd driven the same road, same stretch of highway, same storm, and she'd been sitting right there. Passenger seat, smiling. Until she wasn't. I don't remember the crash, just the lights, the glass, and her voice, soft, almost forgiving, before everything went dark. Now the rain began to fall again, gentle this time, steady. I looked once more at the mirror. She was there. Not as a shadow now, but clear. Her eyes met mine. And she looked peaceful. I blinked and the seat was empty. The highway stretched on, quiet, lonely, and wet. I drove until the sun began to rise, and the fog lifted from the fields. For a moment, I thought I saw her again, reflected faintly in the glass, watching the road ahead, as if guiding me home. Then the light shifted, and I was alone. The desert changes at night. The heat slips away, and the wind moves like a ghost across the dunes. I was driving through that emptiness when I first saw the church, a pale shape in the distance, half buried, walls leaning into the sand like tired bones. There was no town nearby, no road leading to it, just that broken cross, tilted against a copper sky. I stopped the truck, and the world went silent. Even the wind seemed to fade. Only the crunch of my boots as I walked toward the door. The wood was soft, splintered from years of sun and grit. When I pushed it open, a dry breath escaped, like something had been waiting inside too long. The air smelled of dust and candle wax, and something older, something hollow. Light fell through cracks in the roof, thin as paper, and every speck of dust hung suspended, as if time had forgotten this place. The pews were uneven, some melted into the sand floor. And at the front, a row of hymn books, their pages yellowed, edges curled. I brushed the top of one, and the cover flaked away beneath my fingers. When I opened it, the paper whispered, "Not like air." Not like dry pages. It whispered words, soft, layered, voices folding over one another, as if a choir was trapped inside. My hand trembled, and the book slipped shut. The whisper stopped. I tried another. It did the same. Each book carried a faint voice, singing a note too quiet to follow, but impossible to ignore. I stood there a long time, listening, trying to make sense of it. The longer I stayed, the more I felt it, a kind of pulse. Like the building itself was breathing. The walls creaked softly as if shifting in their sleep. And outside, the wind began to hum, low, steady, almost a tune. When night came, I didn't leave. I lit a small lantern near the altar and sat down, watching shadows slide across the walls. The silence deepened, thick, heavy. Then, somewhere above me, a bell rang. Once, then again, clear, sharp, filling every corner of that empty church. But there was no tower, no rope, no bell. The sound rolled through the desert, echoing off the dunes, and with it, the hymn books opened on their own. Pages fluttered, though the air was still. 100 voices rose, thin, mournful, like they had been waiting centuries to sing. I wanted to run. But something in me stayed still. Like leaving would break whatever held this place together. The lantern flickered. The shadows grew taller. They swayed with the song, faces bending in the glass of the windows. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt warmth, like sunlight through old stained glass. But when I looked again, the pews weren't empty anymore. Rows of figures sat in silence, head bowed, hands folded. Their clothes were torn, faded, sand clinging to every fold. Not one of them moved, only the faintest breath lifting from their mouths, in time with the hymn. I took a step back. The floor creaked. All their heads turned, every one of them, eyes like candlelight, flickering, empty. The lantern died. The bell rang once more, and everything fell still. When I woke, it was morning. The church was empty again, no footprints but mine, no marks in the sand, but one of the hymn books lay open at my feet. Its pages trembling, only one line was clear. The desert does not forget its prayers. I closed it gently. The whisper faded. As I stepped outside, the wind rose again, carrying something faint, sweet, and distant, like a bell, ringing far beyond the dunes, calling someone home. The desert at night feels endless, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. No wind, no insects, only the stars, spread wide like salt scattered across black glass. I'd pulled over that night just to watch them. It was late. Cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones, slow and patient. The air smelled like dry iron and dust. My breath drifted pale in front of me, dissolving into the stillness. I remember thinking how bright the stars were. How close. Like I could almost reach one if I just stretched high enough. And then one of them went out, just blinked, gone. I frowned, waiting for it to flicker back. It didn't. Then another vanished. And another, a strange kind of thrill ran through me. Like watching a magic trick I couldn't explain. I leaned against the hood of the truck, eyes fixed on the sky. The darkness was spreading, slowly, quietly, swallowing stars one by one. At first, I thought clouds, but there were no clouds in the desert. Not that night. The air was too still, too sharp, and what replaced the stars wasn't gray, it was black, thicker than the night around it, a shade that didn't belong to the sky. The more I stared, the more I realized it wasn't the stars fading. Something was moving in front of them, something massive. I could feel it, a pressure behind my eyes, a weight above me, like the air had been folded, and something on the other side was pressing through. I tilted my head back, trying to see where it ended. It didn't. The shape stretched across the horizon, and still it kept moving. The stars were vanishing faster now. A wave of black sweeping over them, my heart began to pound. Too loud. Too human against all that silence, I whispered, "Is that the sky?" But the word sky felt wrong. Whatever I was seeing, it was closer. Too close. The darkness had a texture. It shimmered faintly, like something alive beneath water. Then came the hum. Low, vibrating through the sand, through my shoes, up my legs, into my ribs. It didn't sound like thunder. It sounded aware, the kind of sound that makes every animal inside you want to hide. I stumbled backward. The truck door clicked as I grabbed it, but I couldn't get inside, couldn't look away. Something in that darkness was shifting, sliding. The horizon itself was bending, and then, just for a moment, the stars flickered again, like they were reflected on something smooth. That's when I saw it, an edge, barely visible, catching light where no light should be. It was curved, massive, a surface so large it felt like the earth was turning beneath it. Whatever it wasn't flying. It was arriving. My mouth was dry. The air around me trembled, soft grains of sand lifting from the ground, dancing without wind. I backed toward the truck. The engine wouldn't start. Only the faint clicking, the key shivering in my hand. Above me, the last few stars disappeared. Everything turned black, but it wasn't just dark. It was absence, no sky, no shape, no space left for light. For a moment, it felt like the world had been erased, and I was still standing in what was left of it. Then, the hum stopped. Silence poured down, heavier than before. I looked up again, and the stars were back, all of them, every one in its place, as if nothing had ever moved. The desert was still. My breath loud in my throat. I drove until morning. Didn't stop to rest. Didn't look back. But now sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that edge again. The black horizon, folding over the stars, and I can feel it still, something out there, blocking the sky, waiting for us to notice. The desert at night is never quiet, even when it feels like it is. The sand shifts, the wind moves in small sighs, and the fire, our fire, crackled softly between us. It was late. Everyone had gone still, half asleep in their bags, faces faintly orange in the glow. I remember watching the embers drift upward, tiny red sparks climbing into the dark. There was comfort in it, the way the light pulsed against the cold. The last thing I heard before my eyes closed was the low hum of the flame and the desert breathing around us. Then, nothing. When I woke, it was because the air had changed. Cold, sharp, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels unnatural. I sat up, expecting the fire to be dim, fading to ash. But it was gone, completely gone. No smoke, no warmth, not even the smell of it. Just a circle of glass, smooth and perfect, where the fire had been. It caught the pale light of the moon and shimmered faintly, like frozen water. My breath caught. I reached out. The surface was cool, slick beneath my fingertips. "It shouldn't have been," I whispered for the others. No one answered. The tents were still there, shapes against the sand. But the flap of mine was the only one open. I stood. And that's when I saw them, footprints, a line of them, pressing deep into the sand, leading away from the glass circle. Bare feet. 5 pairs. They stretched out toward the horizon, perfectly straight. But none came back. The wind had died completely. Even the air felt held in place. Every sound I made, my steps, my breath, seemed too loud. I followed the prints for a while. My own steps felt small beside them. Each print was sharp, edges clean, as if whatever made them was heavier than it should have been. The moon hung low behind me, its light pale and sickly, turning the sand to silver. The farther I walked, the stranger it felt. The desert floor beneath my boots was warm. Not from the sun. It pulsed faintly like a slow heartbeat beneath the surface. My chest tightened. Something was wrong. I turned back, but I couldn't see the camp anymore, only darkness. Only the endless line of footprints stretching forward. I whispered their names again. Still nothing. When I looked closer, I saw the prints changing. The toes began to blur. The heels sank deeper, and then halfway ahead, they stopped. Just ended. No scuffle, no turn, no sign of anyone returning. The sand around them was untouched, smooth as glass. I dropped to my knees, brushing my hand over it. The warmth pulsed again, stronger this time, like something beneath the surface was aware of me. I pulled my hand back fast. A faint hum rose from the ground, low, electric. It moved through my body, up through my ribs, settling behind my teeth. I wanted to run. But I didn't know where. When I finally forced myself to stand, I glanced back once more. The glass circle was glowing now, faintly, soft white, like moonlight trapped beneath the sand. And inside it, shadows, shapes moving slowly. Like people shifting underwater, I froze. Every part of me screaming but quiet, too afraid to blink. Then one of the shapes lifted its head. Turned toward me, I could feel its attention, even from that distance. My throat closed. I stepped back and the light faded. The desert fell silent again. The footprints behind me were gone. When the sun came up, there was nothing left, just empty sand, and the faintest ring of glass half buried beneath it. No tents. No bags, no trace of fire or friends, only the warmth under the surface. And the feeling that something was still awake down there, watching, waiting for the next fire to go out. The desert at dusk is quiet in a way that feels older than silence. The wind dies before the sun does. The air holds still, heavy, warm, unmoving. I'd been walking for days. No roads, no signs. Just sand and low stone stretching past the edge of sight. My canteen was half empty, and every breath felt dry against my throat. I was starting to believe the world had ended and no one had told me. Then, I heard it, a low rumble far off at first. So faint I thought it was the wind waking up again, but it wasn't the wind. It grew, steady, rhythmic, like wheels over rails. I froze. There were no tracks here. Nothing but desert for miles in every direction. Still, the sound came closer. The ground began to tremble under my boots. Not violently, just enough to feel alive. A hum carried through the air, and in the distance a pale shimmer began to rise from the horizon. It glowed faintly, white, gold like heat bending light. And then I saw it, a train. Steel black, smooth and endless, rolling slow through the open sand. No rails, no path, just movement. It passed less than 20 feet away, its body whispering like a river of smoke. The cars slid by one after another, each window lit with the same dim yellow glow. Inside, faces, dozens of them, pale, still, pressed close to the glass. Their eyes didn't blink. Their mouths didn't move. They just stared, every window. The same, different people, same expression. A quiet kind of waiting. My body felt pinned in place. The hum pressed against my chest. It wasn't just sound. It was vibration. It filled my lungs, made my heartbeat slow. I whispered to myself to break the silence between the wheels. "Where are you going?" The train didn't answer. Car after car kept sliding by, each one perfectly clean, polished like glass. Each faced the same shade of pale. Some leaned forward. Some turned slightly, as if they could hear me. I couldn't tell if they were dead, or something worse. I looked down, half expecting to see rails forming under the sand. There were none. Only the faint shimmer of air bending around the train's body as it passed. The air smelled faintly of iron, cold and old. I waited for the last car. It never came. I tried to count the cars, but after 50, after 100, I stopped. It was still moving, steady, unhurried. Hours might have passed. The sun dropped lower, then disappeared completely, and the train glowed brighter against the dark. I thought of waving, of touching it. But the closer I stepped, the colder the air became. The hum deepened, low enough to ache in my bones, and behind one of the windows, a small face, a child maybe, lifted a hand. I stopped breathing. The hand pressed flat against the glass. Then another appeared beside it. Then another, and another. Dozens of palms, pressed together, all staring through me. The glow flickered once, and I saw my own reflection in the glass. Pale, blurred. Like one of them, I stumbled back. The hum faded for a heartbeat, then grew again, louder. The faces turned away. The windows darkened, but the train kept moving, always forward. I followed it for a while, walking alongside the endless line. The sand shifted gently beneath my feet, crunching against the stillness. I looked for the engine, for the beginning. But it was gone, hidden somewhere far ahead in the dark. I turned and looked behind me, and realized something impossible. There was no beginning there either, no first car, no gap in the horizon. Only the train, stretching both directions as far as I could see. I stood between its reflections, caught in the glow. The air felt thinner. My ears rang. I whispered again, though my voice barely formed. "When does it end?" The hum answered. Soft, low, almost kind. It didn't end. Not that night. Not ever. When the dawn came, the train was still there, rolling through the sand, windows full of faces watching the horizon, as if waiting for something none of us would ever see. And sometimes, when the wind passes just right, I still feel that vibration under the earth, a soft pulse, a memory of metal in motion, like the world remembering a train that was never meant to stop. It was late, somewhere past midnight. The highway behind me stretched for miles, quiet and empty. I'd been driving too long, the kind of tired that turns the road into a slow blur of gray and white lines. When I saw the diner's lights, I almost didn't believe they were real. A flicker in the distance, neon red humming through the fog. It looked like a heartbeat, faint but alive. I pulled over. The gravel cracked under the tires. Heat from the engine rolled into the cold air. Inside, it smelled like old coffee and rain. The kind of smell that never leaves a place. The waitress barely looked up. just nodded toward a booth near the window. I sat down, hands still shaking from the drive. The lights buzzed quietly overhead, casting everything in pale yellow. A jukebox stood in the corner, silent. There were only 2 other people inside, a trucker half asleep at the counter, and a man sitting by the window. I didn't notice him at first, not until the waitress poured my coffee, and my eyes drifted up just for a second. He was sitting the same way I was. Elbows on the table, head tilted slightly, hands wrapped around a mug, same jacket, same hair, same tired slump in the shoulders. It took me a moment to realize what I was seeing. He looked exactly like me, not just a little. Exactly. My chest tightened. The air felt heavier, as if the whole room leaned toward him. I glanced around. The waitress was gone. The trucker's head rested on his arm. No one else seemed to notice. I looked back. He was eating now, a piece of pie, slow, deliberate bites. The plate was white. The fork shone under the flickering light. He didn't look at me. Not once, but every move he made, every blink, every breath matched mine. I tested it. Lifted my cup. Brought it halfway to my lips. At the same moment, he did too. My throat went dry. The coffee burned on my tongue. I turned my eyes to the window beside me, pretending to look outside. Only dust and empty highway. But in the reflection, he was still there. And this time he was staring straight at me. His face didn't move, didn't smile, didn't frown. Just stared, like glass looking back. A hum filled my ears, low and constant like static behind the walls. I blinked, and in that heartbeat, he looked down again, fork cutting through the last piece of pie. The clock above the counter ticked once, then stopped. No sound followed. No hum from the lights, just silence. I watched his hands, still moving, still alive. The silver edge of the fork caught the light, and for the first time, I saw his eyes. They glowed faint silver, like mercury catching fire. Not bright, just enough to feel wrong. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. He chewed one last bite, slowly set the fork down, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. My hand. Then he stood up. The booth across from me stayed empty. But I heard the faint scrape of his chair, the soft echo of footsteps across the linoleum. I couldn't tell where he went. My eyes stayed locked on the window, and in that dark reflection, for one long second, I saw him standing behind me. Close, too close. The smell of coffee turned to metal. The air pressed cold against my neck, then it was gone. The lights buzzed again. The clock ticked forward. The trucker snored softly at the counter. The waitress poured another cup. Everything was normal. But when I glanced at the window, the reflection that should have been mine wasn't. It sat at the booth across from me, motionless, smiling, its eyes still faint, still silver. And I understood, in the quiet hum of that forgotten diner, that I was no longer the one looking in. Something else was. The desert holds its breath at sunset. It's the quietest time of day, when the air goes still, and the heat lifts off the rocks in soft waves. I was camped near the edge of the mesa. Miles of empty land stretched out below, painted gold by the dying light. The silence was heavy, not peaceful, just waiting. I remember watching the last slice of sun touch the horizon, and that's when I noticed them. Shadows, long human shapes, stretching across the sandstone. Dozens of them. But the land around me was empty. No figures. No movement. Just those dark silhouettes spilling across the ground like spilled ink. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, the sun bending against the cliffs, my eyes tired from the glare. But they didn't fade. They grew longer, taller, reaching far beyond where any shadow should go. Some stretched into the valley below, their ends lost in the haze, and every few seconds, they shifted, as if something far away had moved, only there was nothing there to move. The air turned cool fast. Too fast. I zipped my jacket, watching the light fade from orange to gray. The sky above me deepened into violet. The first star flickered through the dusk, and that's when I saw it. One of the shadows twitched, not swaying like a tree in wind, not melting like heat over sand. It twitched. A sharp, sudden motion, a limb bending, then another, my breath caught. The wind rustled softly through dry grass, and for a moment I thought I heard a low hum behind it, like a whisper carried too far to make out. I turned in every direction. No one, nothing, just the mesa, just the light slipping away. But the shadows were moving now, slowly, carefully, bending, turning, shifting their long arms across the rock. One reached toward my campfire, its dark hand stretching until it brushed the circle of light. The flame flickered, then shrank. A cold pulse rolled through me. The night was falling faster now. The horizon swallowed the last band of sun, and in the blue-black dimness the shadows thickened. I grabbed my flashlight, clicked it on. A thin white beam cut across the rock. The shadows should have disappeared under the light, but they didn't. They stayed, and when I moved the beam, they followed. Not the way light does, but the way eyes do, watching. The hum was louder now. It came from everywhere at once, from the sand, the cliffs, the sky. A soft vibration under my skin. The nearest shadow bent closer, as if leaning forward to listen. My voice trembled before I could stop it. "Who's there?" The question died in the air. The hum stopped. For one long heartbeat, everything was still. Then the shadows began to rise, not from the ground, but out of it. The rock beneath their shapes split like glass under frost. And from those cracks, the darkness thickened, lifting itself upward, pulling free. It wasn't like smoke. It wasn't like flesh. It was both. They had no faces, no edges, only the sense of something ancient and endless looking back. The cold was sharp enough to hurt. My breath fogged in front of me even in the desert heat. The flashlight dimmed to a soft glow. The shadows surrounded the campfire's circle, their edges trembling like the surface of water. One leaned closer, and though it had no eyes, I felt it staring. I couldn't move. Couldn't look away. It reached out, just enough for its edge to touch my hand. The ground shuddered. Every shadow on the mesa jerked at once, snapping upright like puppets pulled by the same unseen thread. Then, silence. The hum vanished. The cold wind stilled. The night went back to being just night. When I looked again, the mesa was empty. No figures, no cracks in the stone, just the stars, pale and endless above me. But even now, when the sun dips low and the earth stretches long shadows across the sand, I can see where they once stood. Their shapes still move when the light fades, and sometimes if the wind dies just right, I can still hear the faintest hum beneath the silence. It started as something people only whispered about. That every night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the town would fall silent. Completely. Not the kind of silence that comes when everyone's asleep, but the kind that feels held, suspended. I used to laugh when I heard it. Another desert story, like ghost lights or vanishing roads, until the night I stayed awake. It was mid-July. The air was dry, still, heavy with the smell of hot sand and engine oil. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles above my bed, each rotation clicking softly, like a heartbeat too tired to keep up. 16 a.m. I remember the second hand dragging itself toward the mark. The fan groaned. The air felt thicker, like the whole room was exhaling at once. Then, everything stopped. The clock froze mid-tick. The fan blades hung perfectly still halfway through their turn. Even the air stopped moving. No hum of power lines, no distant highway, no crickets, nothing. It was like the world had forgotten how to breathe. I sat up. The sheets clung to my skin, the warmth trapped under a still air that no longer stirred. Outside my window, the town looked the same, but it wasn't. Streetlights glowed, but the light didn't flicker. It didn't move. It just hung there like paint on glass, and then I saw them. Figures, pale, thin, moving slowly through the stillness. At first I thought they were people, But they didn't walk right. Their steps didn't stir the dust. Their shapes shimmered faintly, as if light bent around them. One stopped under the street lamp. Its face was long, featureless, except for two small dips where eyes should have been. No mouth, no breath. Still, I could feel it listening. It turned its head toward my window, and though it had no eyes, I knew it saw me. My throat tightened. My heart beat. It wasn't moving either. It felt stuck, a pulse trapped mid-beat, like the rest of the world. And yet, I was awake. The being tilted its head, curious. Then all at once, there were more. Stepping from behind parked cars, drifting between frozen figures in doorways. Every person in town was still. I could see them through open curtains. A man at a sink. A woman halfway through turning off a lamp, frozen. The beings moved around them carefully, almost reverently. Touching nothing, watching. When one passed a lamppost, the light dimmed, as though the bulb bowed to it. A faint hum pressed against my ears, low, distant, like the sound of something deep under the earth. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. Something about the air. It held me still. I remember trying to whisper, to ask why I was awake when no one else was. But my mouth wouldn't move, only my eyes. The figure nearest me stepped closer, through the glass, through the wall. The room didn't resist it. It just passed through, its shape bending the air like heat. The closer it came, the colder the room became. My breath hung in front of me, white against the dark. It stopped at the edge of my bed. For a moment, it just stood there, still, listening. Then, with a motion so small I almost missed it, it raised a hand. Long fingers brushed against the clock on my nightstand. The hands twitched once, then started moving again. 18. The fan jolted back to life. Air rushed through the room. The hum of power lines returned, and the being was gone. Outside, the world began to move again. Dogs barked in the distance. Someone coughed. Time. Restarted. I fell back onto the bed, shaking, but the sheets were still cold. When morning came, I went outside. Everything looked normal. But the sand near my porch was glassy, as if the heat of something otherworldly had melted it smooth. I never told anyone. I don't think I have to, because every night just before 2:17, the town goes quiet again. And somewhere in that silence, just before everything stops, I feel something watching, waiting to see if I'll stay awake. This time, I won't. The desert has a way of swallowing time. Days blend into each other. Wind smooths over every trace of what once was. Even bones lose their color here. I'd been digging for 3 weeks outside a forgotten settlement, a stretch of land marked only by dry brush and wind-carved stone. The sun felt closer there. Too close. It pressed against my skin until the air itself shimmered. Most days I worked in silence. The others left 2 days ago. Equipment failure, they said. But I think the quiet got to them. It gets under your skin after a while, that feeling that something ancient is listening. That morning, I struck something hard beneath the sand. A hollow sound, not rock, not pottery, bone. The sand fell away in soft streams, revealing the curve of a skull. Still half buried, the desert wind moved across the open ground, dry and thin, like breath from something old. I brushed the dust from the skull's eye sockets. The air grew colder, though the sun still burned overhead. When my fingers touched the surface, it whispered. At first, I thought it was just the wind. It always finds a way to sound like words, but then I heard it again. A voice, soft, broken. Don't leave me here. My hand froze. The whisper came from the bone itself, a dry hum vibrating through my fingertips. I pulled back. The air went still. I waited. The desert waited with me. Then from beneath the ground, more whispers. Low, layered, hundreds of them, maybe more. Their words tangled together, rising and falling like distant waves. Cold. Dark, please. I stumbled back, but the sand shifted under my boots. The wind rose, and the ground began to breathe. Tiny streams of dust lifted from the earth, as if exhaled from lungs below. I knelt again, hands shaking, and uncovered more skulls. Dozens of them. All arranged in a rough circle, faces tilted toward the sky. Their surfaces shimmered faintly, as though light was trapped beneath them. I told myself it was just heat, the way the sun bends air, but when I reached out, the nearest one moved. Just a fraction. A twitch. Enough to send dust sliding from its hollow eyes. Then, the voices came again. "Don't leave us!" Not again. "Take us from the sand." Each one carried pain, desperation, something human buried under. Centuries of silence. I tried to speak, to ask what they wanted, but the air felt heavy in my throat. The whispering grew louder, wrapping around me like wind through a tunnel. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was inside my head. Memories that weren't mine flickered behind my eyes. Hands reaching through fire. A storm of dust swallowing everything. People falling to their knees, faces covered in ash. Then, nothing. The desert took them and left them here. When I pulled my hands away, the skulls were still whispering, their voices fading into the sand. I covered them again, slowly, carefully. Each handful of sand felt heavier than the last, like the ground didn't want them hidden. By the time the last skull was buried, the wind had gone still again. The desert was silent. But that night, as I packed my things, I could still hear them. Through the canvas walls of my tent, their voices trembled on the edge of sleep. We remember the light. We remember the burning. Don't leave us in the dark. The temperature dropped fast after midnight. My breath came out white, and beneath it, that faint hum again, coming from the ground. I thought about digging again, but I didn't, because when I looked out at the dig site, the sand was shifting, like something was moving underneath it. The mounds where I'd buried the skulls had sunk slightly, and in their place, shallow impressions, as if something had pressed its face up from below the surface. I left before sunrise. Didn't pack everything. Didn't look back. The wind followed me for miles, carrying faint whispers I couldn't quite make out. Now, when I close my eyes, I still feel the cold of that first skull against my hand. Still hear the plea that came from its hollow mouth. Don't leave us here. And somewhere in the quiet between breaths, I think I can still hear them, buried under the sand, still whispering, still waiting for someone else to listen. The desert was colder than usual that night, the kind of cold that settles beneath the skin and stays there. I'd been walking for hours, no moon, just a sky full of pale stars, so many that the sand seemed to glow with them. Then they began to move. At first I thought it was my eyes, the exhaustion, the dry air playing tricks again, but the stars shifted. One after another, they bent downward, like they were bending toward the earth. A pale shimmer rolled across the dunes, soft and alive, a beam of light sweeping the sand like a searchlight. Then another, and another, each one moved in a perfect rhythm, like something was searching. And I realized I was standing right in the open. The air grew heavy. It pressed against my chest, and I felt the sand beneath my boots vibrate, as if something deep below was waking up. I started running. The light followed, slow at first, then faster. It wasn't random. It was tracking me. Every time I glanced back, I saw the beams curve, narrowing into thin spears of white that cut across the dunes. There was a cave ahead, a narrow crack in the rock face, half covered by wind-blown sand, I didn't think. I just ran for it. The moment I stepped inside, the light outside vanished. Silence. Total, absolute silence. My breathing echoed off the stone walls. The air inside was cold and stale, smelling faintly of metal and wet earth. I crouched against the wall, waiting for my heartbeat to slow, for the light to pass. But the longer I waited, the more I realized. I wasn't alone. There was a sound, not movement exactly, but something like the air shifting, as if the cave itself was breathing. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw them. Shapes, dozens of them. Tall, still, pressed against the far wall, like shadows cast by something that wasn't there. The pale light from outside barely reached them, but it was enough to see their edges, long, smooth, almost human, almost. None of them moved. Not at first. I told myself it was the rocks, just the rocks. But the air was thick with something electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. My fingers brushed the cave wall and I felt warmth. Not from me, from inside the stone. Then one of the shapes shifted, just slightly, enough for the light to catch its surface. Skin, if it was skin, reflected a dull, silvery glow, and where a face should have been, there was only emptiness. Smooth, hollow, as if carved from glass that forgot how to be clear. A soft hum filled the cave, vibrating through the air, through my bones. The figures began to move, not walking, gliding, like mist with weight. They formed a slow circle around me. Every breath I took echoed too loud. I tried not to blink, not to make a sound. Outside, the beams of light swept across the sand again, illuminating the cave entrance in flashes. Each flash revealed more detail. Arms too long, fingers tapering to fine points. Eyes, if they were eyes, just faint glows of silver. Like starlight caught in water, one of them leaned close enough that I could see my reflection in its surface. But it wasn't right. My reflection didn't move when I did. It just stared back, breathing slow, mouth slightly open, and in that silence, I heard something. A whisper, not in sound, but directly inside my head. A single thought. Not mine, you shouldn't see us. The hum deepened. The cave shook. The walls seemed to pulse, the stone softening under the pale light. I stumbled back toward the entrance, but the light outside grew brighter, so bright it turned everything white. The shapes didn't follow. They just stood there, watching, as if waiting for something. Then, nothing. When the light faded, the desert was quiet again. The stars had returned, hanging still in the black sky, like they'd never moved at all. I stepped out into the cold air, but the ground beneath me was warm, as if something had just been there. When I looked back, the cave was gone. Just smooth rock, unbroken. I walked until morning, but the horizon never changed. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw those figures, still standing in the dark, watching through a veil of light. Now, when I look at the stars, I can't tell which ones are real anymore. Some of them still move. It was winter, the kind where the desert goes silent after sunset. No crickets, no wind, just the hum of the radio. I'd been sitting in that old trailer for hours, the metal walls creaking in the cold. A red bulb glowed faintly above my desk, painting the dials and wires in dull light. The world outside had long gone to sleep, but I stayed up, listening. I'd always listened. The airwaves were mostly quiet now. No chatter, no call signs, just static that moved like breath, coming and going in soft waves. Sometimes, late at night, I thought I heard things in the static, rhythms too deliberate to be random. Words half-formed, like someone whispering through a wall. But that night, it wasn't a whisper. It came through sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife through cloth, a man's voice, cracking, afraid. They're already here. Then a pause. Just static again, thick and alive, like it was breathing against my ear. Then the voice returned, weaker this time, almost trembling. Don't look at the sky. And then, nothing. The radio went dead. Completely dead. No hum, no static, no background buzz. Just a silence so deep I could hear my own pulse behind it. I sat there for a while, staring at the knobs, the empty frequency screen, the frozen needle. My hands felt cold, but the air wasn't. It was still, like the world was holding its breath. Outside, the wind had stopped. The sand didn't move. Even the power lines, the ones that usually sang faintly in the dark, were silent. Something felt wrong. Like the air itself had weight. I stepped outside, the trailer door groaning as I pushed it open. The desert spread out, endless and flat beneath the night. The stars looked strange. Too still. Too perfect. And I remembered the voice. Don't look at the sky. I tried not to. I tried to look anywhere else. The truck, the radio antenna, the dunes. But there's a pull when you're told not to look. The mind wants what it's denied, so I looked. And the stars were gone, not all at once, but fading like dying embers being covered by ash. One here, then another, until half the sky was just black, no clouds, no movement. Just a deep, swallowing dark that wasn't supposed to be there. Then the edges began to shimmer. A faint ripple like heat above asphalt, but it was too cold for heat. And that's when I saw it. Shapes. Not clouds. Not sky, just things. Dozens. No, hundreds. Of them. Gliding without sound. They blotted out the heavens completely. Each one a shadow darker than the dark itself, and between them, tiny flickers of light, white, slow pulses, like eyes opening and closing in rhythm. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. They weren't flying. They were drifting, watching. I thought I heard something beneath it, a low hum, deep enough to feel in my chest, like the world's heartbeat had changed. Then my radio inside the trailer came alive again. It screamed. Not words. Just a raw burst of static so loud it felt like pressure in my skull. Then it stopped, and the voice returned. Soft this time, almost calm. You saw them. I stepped backward, my boots sinking into the cold sand. The voice wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from everywhere, inside me, through me. You shouldn't have looked. The air grew bright, not with light, but with movement. The shapes above began to descend, slow and endless, like the sky itself was falling. I stumbled back into the trailer, turned off every switch, sat in the dark listening to the hum grow louder. It filled the space, filled my head, every thought drowned in it. When I looked at my watch, the hands were spinning, endlessly, no time left to mark. Outside, the horizon glowed, a white curve, silent and vast, and above it the sky rippled like water. I thought about running, but where do you run when the stars themselves have been taken? So I sat back down at my radio, tuned the dial to nothing, and waited. Static filled the room again, soft, steady, almost peaceful. I think I understand now what the man meant. They're not coming. They've been here, watching, waiting for us to notice. And once you notice, they never leave. I haven't looked at the sky in days, but I can still feel them up there, like a pulse above the clouds, slow and endless. Sometimes when the radio hums at night, I whisper into it, just to see if anyone else is still listening. But the only voice that ever answers is my own.